and Yana handing out some sheets because I couldn't work out how to get everything I wanted onto the overhead. So there's a little sheet there as well. Let me tell you a story while that happens. Once upon a time, there was a pig and a hen. Okay, there they are. There's our pig and there's our hen. And they were having a conversation in the barnyard, as pigs and hens, I suppose, do. And they were talking about their farmer, because he was a wonderful man. He got up early every morning and came out to the barnyard and gave them their breakfast even before he'd had his, and really looked after them well. And so the pig and the hen wanted to do something to please him. And the rooster, I don't know why, but in barnyards, the rooster's always the rooster, isn't he? So he told them what he thought. He said, what you need to do is prepare a nice breakfast for the farmer. So maybe just once he could eat breakfast before he comes out to the barnyard. What you need to do is give him a couple of fried eggs and a nice rasher of bacon. Now, the hen was quite enthusiastic about that. The pig wasn't so sure. You see, for the hen it was just a small gift, but for the pig it was a very costly sacrifice. We've been looking at the book of Leviticus, which is a book of policies and procedures about how to solve the problem that's going to come up on the next verse. And this is the problem. God promised that he would live amongst his people, that he would walk amongst them, that he would be their God. And we know what happens when our immortal, invisible, God-only wise comes into contact with people who are not holy. We know that it doesn't end well for them. I don't need to give you examples because you just really open the Old Testament and there's example after example after example. We can't come into the presence of a holy God. And so this verse is a problem for us. And the book of Leviticus seeks to help us understand that problem, seeks to begin to give us some way of dwelling with a holy God in our midst. And last week we looked at the first of the answers that the book of Leviticus gives us. It gives us 5 sacrifices in chapters 1 to 7. And we looked at the first one. That is the burnt offering. We saw that the burnt offering, thanks. No, back one. Thanks. We saw that the burnt offering was an act of devotion, but always it had to do with atonement first. Have a look at what's up on the screen. This is from Psalm 66. I could have used that lovely psalm that Phil read to us, Psalm 99 too. Say to God, how awesome are your deeds. Listen to the praise in that. How awesome are your deeds. Your enemies cringe before your mighty power because God is the greatest. It's just sheer praise. Come and see what our God has done, what awesome miracles he performs for people. Praise and thanksgiving. And so what do? I come to God's temple with burnt offerings. See, it's about bringing a gift of devotion to God. And we looked at specifically, the next slide please, Ray. Thanks. We looked at the next, at what we get specifically from that burnt offering. We get that it had to be a bull or a ram or a dove with no defect. Had to be a perfect, at least to the eye, a perfect animal. We saw how important blood was, as Len's just reminded us. Without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness. We saw that if you brought a burnt offering, you had to put your hand on its head. And we talked about how significant that would be. You would feel the life of the animal and you would know that that life was going to be taken for you. That identification of the worshipper with the animal was really crucial. The whole animal in the burnt offering had to be burnt. And burning it was a way of offering it to God. In the sacrifices that we're going to look at today, usually only the fat and the liver and the kidneys were burnt. But burning it was a way of giving it to God. It was all consumed. And it was a pleasing aroma to the Lord. If you have a look on your little slip of paper, you'll see that the first 3 sacrifices, the voluntary sacrifices, you didn't have to do them, but they were pleasing to the Lord. The last 2 are not, but the first 3 are. So that was the burnt offering. Okay, let's have a look at the next one. It's the grain offering. And this is strange because for the grain offering, there's no blood. And yet the other sacrifices are very much about blood. You'll see that there's none in this one. We're not going to read the whole thing, but I put it in the whole set of verses so you would see the context and know that it came straight from Scripture. When you present grain as an offering to the Lord, the offering must consist of not an animal, but choice flour. That's a bit strange, isn't it? And you're to pour olive oil on it and sprinkle it with frankincense and bring it to the priests. And the priest will put in his hand, take out a handful, and he will burn that handful. And it's a special gift, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. And the rest of it was consumed by the priest herself. Could we have the next slide, please? Do not use any yeast. Now, we know about yeast. We readers of the New Testament, we know that yeast is usually a symbol, not always, but usually a symbol for evil in the Bible. In Matthew 16, Jesus talks about the yeast of the Pharisees when he's talking about their evil teaching. And in Corinthians, Paul talks about the yeast of evil and malice, or wickedness and malice. So yeast is usually a symbol of evil. So that's why there's no yeast in that. You can't have honey either, because honey is often, not always, but often a symbol for temptation. You know, something sweet that entices you, but actually is quite bad for you, leads you astray. So no yeast, no honey. But what you do get is salt. Salt. What's that got to do with offerings? Well, there are references to a covenant of salt. So just as apparently if you try to burn salt, it's not consumed, it's in a sense everlasting. So God's covenant is everlasting. And so the fact that there was salt added to the second offerings, added to this grain offering, suggests that the people who are bringing it are covenant people, and they have a covenant that is everlasting. So never forget to add salt to your grain offerings. So that's the second of the 5 offerings. The third one, this is a terrific offering, this third one. It's the peace offering. Now, in other translations, it's also called a meal offering or a meat offering or a fellowship offering. Let's have a look. You can bring either a male or a female animal. It doesn't have to be Mr. Cow, who's a bull. It doesn't have to be Mr. Sheep, who's a ram. It doesn't have to be Mr. anything. It could be a female animal. Hold on to that thought, because we'll come back to that. It's really, really important. Okay, that is the peace offering. Could we go on, please? This is still the peace offering. You have to bring your animal, the usual animal, with various kinds of bread made without yeast. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? We don't want sin and evil in the offering that we bring to the Lord, or it wouldn't be acceptable. But look, 3 lines later, you're to bring a loaf that's been made with yeast. What's going on here? We really need to go to the book of Deuteronomy to see it spelled out. In the book of Deuteronomy, you'll see that Moses is writing about the tithe that the Israelites were instructed to bring, and they're told that they're to bring the tithe to the temple or to the tent, and they're to bring their tithes of grain, new wine, olive oil, and firstborn of males, etc. Doing this will teach you always to fear the Lord your God. But look what happens next. This is absolutely amazing. What you're to do with what you bring to the tabernacle is you are to feast. God's calling you, as you bring your offering, to have a great big party and to celebrate in his midst. It's as if God and you are celebrating together, and your family and your friends. The point of bringing this particular offering was to have a great party with God. It's not I have to give this because God's a holy God and I'm not, so I have to reluctantly hand over my best. It's no, bring your stuff to the tabernacle and have a party. Enjoy your God. Celebrate with your God.